Slimehouse TV, myself Theo Kane, hope everybody is good, hold tight everyone that's locked in. So if you've been watching any of my recent episodes, you'll know that a couple of weeks ago, we headed down south and hooked up with my friend and fellow YouTuber and fellow toy collector, Bill Making Stuff. And not only did we have an awesome little toy hunt down in Portsmouth and then get a private tour of his iconic crafting studio, but then I also got to have a go on a brand new war game that Bill's really into at the minute called Tonks. Now, in order to play this game with Bill, I needed to create my own tonk, my own personal Slimehouse design tonk, which, as you can probably imagine, I had a lot of fun doing. And whereas Billy's big on scratch building and creating things from recycled household junk, I wanted to go more down the route of toy production, 3D sculpting and printing and that kind of thing, just to keep things different, because obviously toy design and toy production is the background that I come from. So in today's episode, we're going to be on some pure creative vibes. I'm going to show you my entire process, how I go about designing and making something like this, and of course showing you what went down when we got to Bill's house. So if that sounds like a bit of you, sit back, make sure you're comfy, and get strapped in for a very special and truly unique episode of Slimehouse TV. So I should probably start by explaining what Tonks even is. Basically, it's a new indie war game created by Apocrypha Now, where two or more people create their own little tanks, or tonks, and face off against each other. It's got a real simple rule set, and for the past few months, Bill's been making videos about it over on his YouTube channel. Now, as you'll probably know, it's no secret, I love Bill's videos. I'm always bigging him up. I love his editing style. I love how he lights them. I love how he comes across in his videos, his whole vibe, and I love the stuff that he creates. So when he asked me if I'd be up for making my own tonk and having a game with him while we were down south toy hunting, you know that I was all over that. Now, although I don't cover it as much as I would like to, you know that I'm big into Old Hammer and Warhammer and Hero Quest and all that kind of thing. I never get to play it as much as I would like, but whenever I do, I always get really into it. And also any excuse to create something cool for a video or a dope collab project, I'm pretty much always down. So I decided straight away to set about starting to create my own tonk to go up against one of Bill's creations. Now, when it comes to designing stuff for myself, I like to draw inspiration from things that I love and properties that have spoken to me over the years. I grew up on all that dope 80s and 90s stuff, cool cartoons and toys and vibrant colour schemes, all the things that now make those kind of designs so reminiscent of that era. So I definitely wanted to pull inspiration from all of that stuff. That's still such a broad landscape of different aesthetics to grab ideas from though. So I started to think, what could my tonk potentially look like? Would it be robotic? Would it be organic? Would it be alien or military? Would it have a driver or would it be sentient? Lots to think about. Either way though, the one thing that I did know is that I wanted my tonk to feel like something that I would have played with as a kid growing up. So before I put any kind of pen to paper, I pulled out a bunch of my favourite 80s action figure vehicles just so I could take a good look at them and really think about what it is that I like about them that makes them special and try and replicate a little bit of that in my tonk design. Now, completely by chance, around the time of me starting to make this video, I got sent this Metal Slug 3 building block kit from a Japanese toy company called Pantasy. Now, I'm going to talk more about this thing in a separate video, but the fact that it was Metal Slug themed made me feel like I had to build it before making my tonk and show a bit of it in this video, because for anyone that doesn't know, Metal Slug features some of what are probably the most iconic tanks in 16-bit gaming. In the games, not only do you fight these really distinct looking enemy tanks, but you can also commandeer them and drive them around and use them against enemies as well. And a lot of the tonks that I've seen people create since Bill did his videos on them feel like they would fit perfectly in a Metal Slug game. Now, I'm not a big building block guy or Lego kit collecting kind of person or anything like that. I've built Lego before on this channel, but not a ton, so I'm probably not the best person to review this kind of set, but for me personally, it was a very fun thing to build. I'd definitely like to do more of them. The company Pantasy that sent me this thing as well have a bunch of really cool iconic licenses under their belt, lots of cool Japanese IPs and that kind of thing, so if you want to try one of these out for yourself, or check out any of the other products that they've got, I'll put a link down below to their website, and also add a little discount code for you in case you want to buy anything from their store for yourself. So anyway, I'd done a load of messing about, I'd built this metal slug kit, I'd done lots of research into my favourite 80s vehicles and that kind of thing, and I was still so torn on what kind of style I was going to go for. Luckily for me though, Bill came up with this really cool system on his Discord where you rolled a dice and depending on what number you got, that then told you what kind of tonk you would have to make. I rolled a 5, which meant that I was going to have to create an alien tonk, which was awesome for me because I loved that style, and as soon as I knew that I was creating an alien tonk, I knew exactly what kind of alien tonk I was going to be creating.
There's two types of collector. Strange space, square space. Square space is like your Buck Rogers, your typical sort of lockjawed action heroes and your conventional spaceships and shit. Strange space is weird things with frogs on their heads and like space caterpillars and monkeys and all that kind of crap.
So if you keep up to date with my videos, you'll be no stranger to the term strange space and how much I love that type of design. So when I found out that I was going to be creating an alien tonk, I knew that strange space was the direction that I was going to be moving in. Now I know I talked earlier about putting pen to paper, but I mostly like to work digital these days. I much prefer it. I love how much freedom it gives you. I also didn't want to sketch this thing out because I already kind of had an idea in my head of how I wanted it to look. So the first thing that I knew is that I didn't want it to have wheels or tracks. I wanted this tonk to run on what would be more like the foot of a giant slug. I wanted to go pure organic with my tonk and make it look less like something that would come off a production line in a factory and more like a living organism that was grown in some kind of hive. I knew the kind of shape that I wanted it to be. I didn't want mine to look like a tank from Metal Slug. The idea for this thing was more like something you would face in an old 16-bit Amiga run and gun or space shooter. Those games always had a ton of levels set in these like mad vast alien colonies that looked like you were trapped in some kind of intestine, and they would be full of these weird organic flying ships and other mad creatures, and I'm a big fan of that style, so that was the whole thought process behind the design of my tonk. To anyone interested as well, the program that I'm using here is called Nomad Sculpt. It's literally just a £10 app that you can buy on your iPad, and I'm by no means an expert on it. I'm still learning every time that I use this thing, but it's pretty user friendly, and it's definitely one that I'd recommend if you're wanting to get into doing a bit of 3D sculpting for yourself. You can use a symmetry tool on it, which means that everything that you sculpt on one side then gets replicated on the other, which is nice to get all your basic shapes in proportion, but I then always like to go back afterwards, turn that feature off, and do all my fine texturing and some fine sculpting just to make everything look a bit natural so it don't look too digital. Also, the colour scheme that I've thrown on it is just something to help me differentiate the different parts of it. I'm definitely going to be going with this kind of colour scheme when I do the final paint job, but it won't 3D print in these colours or anything like that. When I print it out, it'll just be one solid block colour. This is literally just so I can see what it might look like once it's all painted while we're still working on it. So now that I had it all 3D printed, this was my first time seeing it actually in the real world and not just digitally on my iPad. This kind of 3D printing as well, to anybody that doesn't know, is resin printing. There's a couple of different ways that you can 3D print, but for this small high detailed stuff, I always find that resin printing is the best way to go. Now as you can see, I ended up printing a few off, just to try and get the best results that I could, which I find is usually the case when you're 3D printing. You have to tweak stuff here and there to get it right. No ever really prints off perfect first time. But now that I had a few to choose from, I picked out my favourite one that I thought would look the best in the battle, quickly magnetised the turret so that I could swivel it round 360 without it falling off, and then took it outside to get it primed and ready for painting. Oh yeah, and guess where I'm spraying this thing as well? Only in my new Slime House studio. or at least what will be very soon. To anyone that doesn't know, for the past few months we've been building a whole new workspace for filming my Slimehouse episodes and doing all my creative projects in moving forward, and this tonk is the very first thing that I've painted inside it, which makes it feel kinda special and a great first project to christen it with. So for the base coat I used this, Colour Forge Salamander Green. It gave it a real nice finish and I've been eyeing up this product for a while, so it was a good excuse to try it out. And as I'd showed you earlier in the sculpting app, I had already played around with some colours, so I did kinda have an idea of where I was wanting to go with it, which was very helpful as I was really running out of time to get it all finished at this point, so it really didn't leave any room for experimenting. I did know that I wanted to go with a real vibrant toxic colour scheme, almost like Devastator colours from Transformers, lots of greens and purples, something that would look really different to Bill's tonk, because no doubt he was going to be painting his more dark and rusty. I knew that I wanted to use lots of inks and contrast paints because I wanted it to feel like a wargaming miniature. I'm usually used to painting things to look like action figures that I've made for myself. I only really paint Warhammer style stuff when I'm like painting Warhammer. But like I said, because I wanted this to feel more like a legit wargaming piece, I spent a lot longer like building up tonal layers and doing tiny highlights and that sort of thing. I also knew that I wanted these sacks on the back of these twin cannons to look like something that would be attached to Biolante's chest from Godzilla. I've always liked that look, and although I don't think it's something that I was consciously doing at the time, it's definitely something that I must have been subliminally thinking about when I was sculpting them. Now normally this is the part where Bill would start giving you a bit of lore about the thing that he's created. Painting time is boring time and that's story time and all that. But we're going to have to do all that later in the video because I had to pretty much speed paint through this whole thing to get it finished and ready before we left. So I didn't really get the chance to spend the time on it that I would have liked to. By the time that it was done, I literally had to film it quick and then get in bed because it was only a few hours before we would be leaving on our road trip to head down south to do the 5-hour drive to Bill's house. Now as you'll probably know because I've mentioned it like 1,000 times at this point, we went down south because we went toy hunting with Bill. We went to the Vintage Toy Monster in Portsmouth, me, Bill and Bentlegs, and came back with some really nice pieces. But after that we went back to Bill's house. Now obviously we had a game of Tonks, but one of the things that I haven't really talked too much about is the fact that we got to have a look at Bill's studio and see it in person, which if you're a fan of his work and you've watched his channel for any number of years like I have, you can probably imagine was like pretty incredible.
Watch your heads.
You don't expect it to be here.
Did I say you could sit in that chair?
Yeah. You don't expect like. I suppose you film it on a wide-angle camera, but it is like a.
Pretty wide, about 12 millimeters.
It's like a perfect little workshop, like hidden in a way that most people would just use to fill it with crap, but you properly utilise that space so well. So being a subscriber of Bill's channel for such a long time now, it was honestly pretty surreal to have a look around his workspace. See Cat and so many of his builds that I've watched him create in his videos up close and in person was something that I honestly felt pretty privileged to experience. And it was one of them that as much as they look good on camera, they look so much more impressive when you see them in real life. I'm seeing the bounty board that he made with all the creature skulls on the top of it. I'm seeing the trading post that he created with all of his Patreon followers. I'm seeing the giant scrap monster that he made, his Halloween mask, the giant crab monster, the rolling rocker, all these classic things that I've seen him create in his videos. Seeing him in person, like I said, was truly surreal. It also has to be said that his studio is probably the best use of space that I've ever seen. Like, I know that he says in his videos that he works in a cupboard and you assume that's just him joking, but it really isn't. It is just like the eaves of a loft space. Yeah, he's created this incredible workshop in there. It's got everything that you could need around you. It's crammed with tools and materials and other bits that inspire him, and it all just works so well. And being sat there in his chair surrounded by all this creative stuff made me feel inspired, like I wanted to sit and build something. Obviously though, unfortunately, we wasn't there to craft, we was there to do battle. War was on the horizon and me and Bill both had a game of Tonks to have, and that's something that we definitely did do. Now I'm not gonna lie, it did get a little bit full on. When you travel 5 hours, you don't travel to lose, especially when Bill's the one that sent for me. I didn't want to pull any punches, and it's safe to say that, yeah, it did get a little bit intense. But more on that a little bit later. I'm going to let you know where you can go to see that battle that went down. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of that lore that I promised you. Now in order for me to talk about the lore of this tonk, obviously I need to be painting one. That's the Bill Making Stuff way, and this is a Bill Making Stuff collaboration video after all. And I do have plenty of those other tonks left, the ones that I printed before. And although painting that little Tonk was fun, I figured that it'd be cool to paint something a little bit more impressive this time around, so I decided to print a much bigger version of my Tonk, a Mega Tonk, one that felt a bit more action figure scale rather than wargaming size, and also paint it in much more of an action figure style as well, just to switch it up a little bit to the last one that I did. Now this thing printed off so big that it almost broke my printer, which I'm really glad it didn't because I would have been wounded. Like, I had to unscrew the resin bath and slide everything off together just to get it off the build plate. It was stupid, and it's safe to say that I'll never try and print anything this big off in one ever again. This time around as well, I wanted to get out my airbrush and try and get some nice gradients across the model because I was working with something a little bit bigger. So I built myself a quick spray booth out of a cardboard box, sprayed the whole thing white with a nice matte primer, pulled out a bunch of toxic greens that I'd bought specifically for this, and started the action figure style paint job on my freshly printed Mega Tonk. So thousands of years ago, in a far off distant star system, there was once a flourishing jungle planet about half the size of Earth. It had got no colonising species on it or anything like that. It had got animals and plants and creatures, but the entire planet was completely void of any humanoid type species. There were no living life forms on it that could make tools or weapons or build villages or any kind of civilizations. It were basically just a giant world of plants and animals and greenery that lived as its own perfect ecosystem. Now the reason for this was not because the planet was incapable of evolving intelligent life forms. The planet itself was in fact one giant intelligent life form, like one big sentient green brain, and one that was so clever that it knew that it could never allow itself to create anything that could potentially destroy the perfect ecosystem that it had created. This almost like planet-sized terrarium that was untouched and pure and thriving just the way that it was. The planet was basically like a god of its own little world. It could create its own life forms, and because it was so powerful, it was able to create these life forms with as little or as much intelligence as it wanted, and it chose to keep everything simple, because it had always been like that and it always worked. Everything perfectly balanced as its own little paradise. That was all until one day, when it was discovered by a race of aliens who were currently locked in their own civil war. Now the reason for why they were fighting and stuff isn't important to this story, but what is important is that they discovered this jungle planet and instantly started using it as one of their bases of operations. Now there were lots of different planets in their network that they occupied, but the reason that they liked this one so much is because it was so untouched and so thriving with vegetation that it was the perfect place for them to build what they needed to build and set up a huge network of strongholds. And they were actually only on this planet for like 4 years, but due to their crazy advanced technology, they managed to set up tons of military bases and garrisons and weapons manufacturing facilities across almost all of the planet's surface, making the whole thing a big target for enemy forces who eventually started attacking their bases with airstrikes. This soon turned into fighting on the ground, and before long, the whole planet had become a brutal alien war zone. Like most wars, these battles turned into leaders pressing big buttons, and before long, the planet ended up getting hit with a bunch of giant nuclear-sized explosions that completely burnt its entire surface to a crisp, leaving nothing left living on it, none of the aliens that had fortified it, none of the plant life or animals or anything, all gone, all vaporized, everything dead. Everything except one small part of the planet's brain. One tiny piece that was left buried inside its core, severely damaged but still alive, and left with so much mental and physical trauma from being attacked that it instantly went into this crazy survival mode. Like I said, this whole planet is like one giant living god, one that's capable of creating and evolving living organisms, and it had just felt everything that it had ever made all get destroyed all around it. Years passed, thousands of years in fact, and in this time, this living planet had slowly started to grow itself back and regenerate, until it was now not only back to its former glory, but it was even bigger and more thriving than ever, almost triple the size that it once was. And this time, all the plants and life forms that had spawned across its surface were not defenseless like before. This time round, it made sure that every living organism that it had created had an array of deadly defense mechanisms. All of the plant life was now much bigger and carnivorous, the creatures were more vicious and armoured, the planet's entire exterior now constantly emitted a poisonous gas that would melt anything that wasn't one of its native species, and on top of all that, it had also done the one thing that it had never wanted to do before. It created life forms that had the mental capacity to create their own networks and civilizations and armies. This planet had spent its entire existence never wanting to create a species like this in case they ended up destroying it, when in actual fact, it were exterior forces from other planets that posed the greatest threat, and it vowed to never make this mistake again, and make sure that if anybody ever landed on this planet in the future, they would be met with the full wrath of everything that it could throw at them. So basically this Tonk is just one of the many battle vehicles that this civilization ended up creating. Probably finding some old vehicle schematics from the alien race that went to war there thousands of years before, of a tank, and then altering them to grow them from organic green biomass, because after all that's what this entire planet is made from. Which means that this Tonk is actually a living creature. There's no driver inside it or anything like that, it's actually alive. That's why it's got this eyeball at the front and this giant maw mouth. Now, it's not a very practical design. There's lots of areas that it'd be great to hit if you were trying to target it, but they're all just still working that out. They've never been to war before, so I imagine over time that they'll develop this thing and they'll make it better. I also reckon this whole race has lots of different vehicles and weapons and organic mech suits and stuff, all grown from the matter of the planet, flying manta ray creatures and all sorts of cool stuff. And it's all things that I'd like to explore in the future. But for now, I'm really happy with this Tonk as a base to start from, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where this might take me on a future project. Maybe I'll create a whole army, a whole battlefield of these things that I can then face Bill in a different game, Stargrave or whatever it is these other games that he plays. I'll create a whole army of these things, maybe, one day, eventually. So there you have it, my finished Mega Tonk, and honestly, this end result is something that I'm really happy with. You'll probably notice that it's a different green to what I originally airbrushed on it, and the reason for that is that neon green, I really liked the colour, but it was almost like a contrast paint, which made it really hard when you were trying to cut back when you made mistakes, and I make a lot of mistakes when I'm painting, and I like to be really neat with my cutbacks, and that contrast paint just kind of made it impossible. So I decided to make an executive decision and paint the whole thing one colour green, and the end result is actually something that I'm even more happy with than I was when I airbrushed it. I also put it next to a bunch of my Trash Bag Bunch figures, and it really looked like a legit vehicle that were made for them, which is what I was going for all along. Trying to create something that looked like the kind of thing that I played with when I was a kid. So yeah, very happy with it. As you can see as well, compared to the original size one, it's much bigger. I would show it you next to the original one that I painted, but I don't actually have that anymore. I gave that to Bill as a gift that, yeah, he seemed really happy with.
Cheers. Thanks. Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, it's nice. Thanks. Just put this over here.
I also gave him a copy of my movie Unit 11, and he seemed happy with both gifts. You never really know with Bill, but either way he must have been pretty stoked with them, because he gave me a gift in return, and not just any gift, he actually gave me one of his original builds from one of his old episodes, which was absolutely amazing, because I remember watching that episode when I first kind of discovered Bill, so to have one of his creations now on my shelf next to the stuff that I create feels like a full circle moment to me. Very pleased with that, so yeah man, thank you Bill, thank you.
I can have that one. Oh, no way.
I thought just because it's quite colourful.
Yeah. He's going to sign it for me. Bill's giving me one of his original makes. Do you remember what episode it's from? What number?
Quite an early one.
24.
Is it?
Yeah? No, I don't know.
There's two for you.
Oh.
There you go. It's a bit dusty. You'd have to give it a little clean when you get home.
He's awesome. Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it. I know you
And,
I know you find it really hard to be nice to
thank
people.
You for your
so
signed DVD.
we're,
I haven't got a DVD player.
well,
I just think
it looks nice.
just
Yeah, it's probably the best looking thing on there. So.
See you then. Bye.
Now, as I mentioned, when we got to Bill's, we did get to have a game of Tonks. It was a lot of fun. He filmed it all. He's currently editing it all, and that's going to be available to watch when he drops his next episode. So obviously, I'll put the link to his channel down in the description below so that you can subscribe to his channel if you haven't already, because like I said, it was a very intense battle report. It's probably going to be like no battle report that you've ever seen before, so it's definitely not one that you're going to want to miss. So that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, I hope that you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to give it a like, and if this is your first time checking out my channel, if you're here because you're a Bill Making Stuff viewer, then you're very welcome. I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV. I do videos every single week, so if you enjoyed today's episode, chances are you're going to enjoy the other stuff that I drop on here as well. If you are new to the channel, then please introduce yourself down below, don't be shy. And if you're a regular viewer, what do you think of my Tonk? Do you think it's as cool as the Crush Room? Are you looking forward to seeing the rest of the stuff that I make out of the lore that I created for this Tonk? Let me know down in the comments below as well. Regulars to this channel and Slime Alliance members and Slime Renegades will know that I've got a Patreon. I'll put the link to that down in the description below. That really helps us fund projects like this, enables us to drive around and hook up with cool people and do collaborations. And as always, I want to shout out the new Patreon members because I've had quite a few new people join since the last episode. So shouts to Ian Clark, Phil Wallace, I Made This, and Ricky Bowers all joining the Slime Renegades. Also shouts to Countless Wolf 47 joining Team Z. And last but not least, big up to Phil Wallace joining the Slime Alliance tier. Thank you so much, brother, I really appreciate it. All these people that have joined the Patreon have now directly helped fund future projects and help me make Slimehouse bigger and better than ever. So if you want to do that, like I said, the link's down below. Now, if you want to hit me up but you don't want to comment publicly, but you'd like to hit me up with a direct message, the best place to do that is over on Instagram at Theo_Kane_Slimehouse. That's also the social media that I'm the most active on, and it's the best place to keep up to date with anything else that we've got going on here at Slimehouse TV. So with all that said and done, like I said, I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV, and I look forward to catching you in the next episode. Until then, I'm gone. Pow!